Hey y'all, welcome back. Today I'm wrapping up all the books that I read in August, and this has actually been my best reading month so far this year. I picked up my reading quite a bit and I'm feeling like very motivated going into September, so I'm very happy with how my reading has gone this month. I ended up reading 7 novels and 3 short stories, and of those, 5 I've already covered in a mid-month wrap-up, so I'm going to link that in the cards up above and in the description down below, so if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts on those 5 books and stories, I'll refer you to that. So the first thing that I ended up reading in August, which I moved on myself here, is Shelley Parker Chan's You Became the Sun. I've been reading this for ages and I finally finished it, and I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. After that, I read The Last Word by Taylor Adams, which I gave 4.5 stars. Then I read How to Defeat a Demon King and 10 Easy Steps by Andrew Rowe. Give this one 3.5 stars, and I really recommend this if you like Legend of Zelda at all. And after that, I read 2 short stories. It was Compulsory by Martha Wells and Wait for Night by Stephen Graham Jones, and I gave both of them 4 stars. I thought they were both very fun. So then moving into the second half of the month, the first thing I read was I Never Thought of It That Way by Monica Guzman, which is a nonfiction book about having difficult conversations with people who are across the political divide from us. And I think this is a really interesting book. I think it doesn't dig as deeply into some of its ideas as I would like it to, but it's written by this woman who is a journalist, and she is herself very liberal, and her parents are very conservative. They both voted for Trump twice, and so she's talking about like her personal experiences with this kind of political divide, and then talking about a lot of the science behind how we've become divided and what are some of the skills that we can cultivate and things we can do to kind of bridge that gap and make connections and start seeing the other side as people again. Basically is kind of the gist of the book. I think it's really interesting, and I think it offers a lot of good insights and helpful tips on like how to have difficult conversations, how to approach them, how to gauge when the time is right to have them. But I do think that this book fails to dig into the ideas that it's talking about like enough, because there are various moments when she talks about was that necessary? My cat just shoved my clock off my table. It's fine. The clock is very old and very sturdy. It's fine. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Thank you, Elwood, for that little interlude. She talks a lot about like having conversations around like immigration and gun control and things like that. Now, what I thought was interesting is there's a recent book that came out last year, and she skirts both abortion and gender-affirming care as topics, which I thought would have been really relevant to include, because I think those are some of the other really big topics that have come up, but she talks like at length about gun control and immigration. But I think the issue I was having is that she talks about like finding those moments and finding connection with people, and it felt like what she was thinking about was having these kind of abstract conversations about what we believe and why we believe it, and I don't think that she really addressed well enough like how do you have those conversations when the beliefs on the other side, whoever you're talking to, their beliefs are fueling policies that are actually doing current active harm to marginalized communities. I think that really needed to be addressed, and it never really was touched on at all. So I would have liked to see some part of the book talk about that, about the difficulties incurred there, where like that belief is not just like an abstract thought, but is currently actively harming people. So I would have liked a little bit more on that, but I think it does offer some good insights and some useful tips, which I think I may have already said, but I think it's a good resource, but I would have liked it to go a little further. So after that, I ended up picking up the audiobook for Empty Smiles by Catherine Arden. This is the conclusion of a middle grade horror series that follows 3 young friends who end up in kind of a game of wits against an entity known as the Smiling Man, and the 4th book picks up right where book 3, or like some number of months after book 3 ends, but like following the emotional fallout of the end of book 3. So I can't really tell you much about the plot without ruining book 3 for you, but I think this is a really fun series overall. It's very spooky, it's very easy listen. I do particularly like the audiobooks. They're all narrated by Renee Dorian, and I think that she does a fantastic job. I really have enjoyed all of them, and they've been really great to listen to while I'm working. I think this last book is the weakest of the series. It doesn't really develop things, I think, enough. It introduces some new ideas. We start to learn more about the Smiling Man and who he is outside of just his kind of harassment of these children. but it doesn't really go anywhere with that. And I think the actual like puzzle element of this was far too short. The ending feels very rushed. I noticed I saw a lot of Goodreads comments after I read it that mentioned the same thing. So I think the ending just feels like it's very abrupt and it's almost like a little bit too neat. But I do think it's still a very fun series, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for something like fun and spooky to listen to for the like spooky season that is now almost upon us. The next thing I wrote was for a class, and this was Othello by William Shakespeare. This is, I think, the most unusual of Shakespeare's plays that I've read. This one is told entirely by the villain. We don't get like the internal monologuing or anything for the hero Othello, and it's told primarily by Iago. And somehow we still end up not really understanding Iago's motives. I've seen it argued that like he tells us his motives, but I think that the things that he tells us, the reasons he gives us for why he's trying to ruin Othello's life and tear down Desdemona and tear down Cassio, they're not really sufficient to explain the things that he does in this play, because he goes to quite drastic lengths to ruin everybody's lives. I think it's a really fascinating play for that reason. We're getting so much of his internal monologue, but we really still know so little about him. I think the ending is also very interesting. There's a line in there that basically someone tells him like, you're a devil if you don't die, and then he doesn't die, and he's like, well, I bleed, but I didn't die. And so there's this interesting implication around that I think is fun. But I really enjoyed this, and it's one that, like, the more I think about it, the more I like it, and I really enjoyed talking with my classmates about it. So I think I would probably upgrade my rating, which at the time was 3.5 stars. I probably would upgrade that to a 4 now. I like it more the more I think about it. So really glad I picked this up, and I'm probably going to be rereading it because I think I'd like to write a paper on it. I just got to figure out what the topic of that is going to be. Next, I read an arc of He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker-Chan, this being the sequel to She Who Became the Sun, and I loved this book. Both of the books, actually. I love this duology. I think it is brilliant. I think the characters are all super complex and interesting, and I really like the way that the second book expands the emotional stakes of the book. We get 2 new point of view characters, and it feels like it expands the world in an interesting way. We find out a lot more about all of our different characters. They get to interact in some really interesting ways that they didn't get to in the first book, and I'm trying so hard not to ruin any of the plot for you, but the way that this book ties up all of the loose ends from the first book is just brilliantly done, and I think this one is just super emotional. This made me cry like 5 different times. It is just so beautifully written and impactful, and I love this book so much. So if you haven't already picked up either of these books, which are a historical fantasy duology set in 14th century China, it's a like gender-bent retelling of the rise of the first emperor of the Ming Dynasty. They're just brilliant, and you should definitely pick them up. And the last thing I read was The Six Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow. This one I think was a very popular short story a couple of months ago. Was it last year? Might have been last year. Anyway, I saw a bunch of people reading this. Everybody was loving it, and I decided to pick it up the other day, and I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I think it just didn't connect for me the same way it has for other people, but I did learn from that I really like her writing, and I'm very excited to now read the other book of hers. I'm pointing because it used to be on this top shelf. I also have The Once and Future Witches somewhere on this side of the shelves, and I'm very excited to read that one now because I really enjoyed her writing, and I think her character work is really interesting. I think I just didn't totally connect with this, and this one is a like time loop story, and I don't think I like time loops all that much. So very interesting. It's about a young woman who is spared by the scent of war, and about her fighting on behalf of the prince who kind of takes her in, and about love and loyalty and rage in some ways, in a way that's very interesting, kind of like righteous anger. And I think that it's an interesting story, and I also think a lot of it went over my head. So not my favorite, but definitely looking forward to picking up some other things by the same author, because again, her writing was just lovely, and I am interested to see what she'll do with like a longer format. So that's everything I read in August, and I'm just really pleased. It was a really good month, both quality and quantity wise. I didn't give anything under 3 stars, and I generally think it was like 3 up as being good ratings. Those are things that I like to things that I love, and I'm just really happy, and I'm feeling very good going into September and kind of keeping up that pace, and I think I'm very motivated at the moment to keep reading. So that's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite or least favorite book of August was, and if you don't have anything you want to say, put a dragon in the comments to let me know you were here. So thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting every Tuesday and Saturday, So there is more content coming soon, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.